Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, good evening for all of you whenever you are. Welcome to this WLE webinar on innovations in soil health monitoring for nature and people. This is part of a webinar series of WLE. WLE has been the CGIAR program on water, land, and ecosystems, where we have been doing research on soil health during the past 10 years. So we are very delightful to have you all here with us today, because it's, I think, a very important moment to have this conversation about soil health. Soil health is the foundation of our food systems. So what it means is that we have been working in the CGIAR on soil health, not only for the importance of soil health for crop productivity, but also because soil health mediated the provision of ecosystem services that are very important for our society, like, for example, climate change mitigation, like, for example, are important for the provision of water-related ecosystem services, and are also very key to host a key biodiversity that provides important functions for us. So today we want to recognize that, and why it's important to do this in this moment. And there are two main reasons why we want to discuss today about soil health. The first one is because investments in soil health are needed to reach the targets of UN conventions that are very important nowadays. One, the UNFCCC, because of the importance of soil health to achieve climate change mitigation goals. The second one is the UNCCD and the importance of soil health to reach land degradation neutrality goals. And the third one is the currently UNFCCC, where we have seen how the Food System Summit is recognizing soil health as a key pillar also of our food systems. So right now, that's why we want to discuss about soil health, because I think we are now paving kind of the route towards the commitments ahead as a part of these conventions. And the second reason why we want to discuss today this is because WLE, as other CGIAR programs, are coming to an end, and then it's time to reflect on what we have been. And also we are starting, we are just about in the CGIAR. So we also want to take this opportunity to reflect on how should be the future of research on soil health in the CGIAR. So for today, we'll have 3 moments in this webinar. The first one, we are going to be listening about what have been the trends in WLE. As part of this webinar are going to be 2 Ignite presentations by 2 of our main soil scientists working in WLE on soil health. Going to be a panel where we will have the honor to receive insights from people at the CGIAR about soil health and how they see soil can play an important role in different areas. And so with this, I want to a webinar, and also I appreciate that all, speakers and panelists are going to keep on your time, so we have time at the end of the session for questions and answers from the audience. So with this, I'm now happy to introduce Brent Swallow. Brent Swallow has been part of the WLE Independent Steering Committee. Brent Swallow is working right now at the University of Alberta, but also he has been very close to the CGIAR because has been working there as well in the past years. So he knows us very well, and that's why we have invited him now to talk a little bit on how he sees the trends over time in WLE, and especially in relation to investments in soils research. So Brent, the floor is yours, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot, Marcella. So I'll make this short and tight. So it's not going to be a kind of history of soil work, which we have people like Ratan Lal who will do some of that at the end. I just wanted to kind of give you 2 points in time. So I or 3 points in time. I started working in the CGIAR with ILCA in 1991 and was there until 1998 when I joined ICRAF. And at that time, the work on soil reflectance spectroscopy was starting with Keith Shepard and colleagues, and that's some of the work we'll hear some continuations of that work at the same time as I had colleagues who were working with the Tropical Soil Biology and Fertility Program, working across Africa. So soils was certainly on the agenda for a long time. The issue is kind of how that I wanted to raise was how has that work been done? And what kind of impact has it had, and why I'm so excited about the future. After I left CGIAR, there was a Stripe review of natural resource management in the CGIAR in 2012, at which time the statement was made that despite the previous decade had been very good at clarifying the need for natural resource management research in the CGIAR, but that there was continued problems, continued major inefficiencies in land allocation, soil husbandry, agricultural systems continue to emit excessive greenhouse gases. There continue to be overharvesting of natural resources. And despite all of these problems, there was relatively little evidence of the CGIAR producing international public goods, addressing those issues, and that the impacts that were measurable were mostly local in scope. And so there was a sense of the need for different approaches with more greater impact. I just want to flash forward to yesterday. Yesterday, I attended a CCAF's FAO World Resource Institute webinar on achieving the nationally determined contribution ambition in agriculture that focused on soil carbon as a major opportunity, a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, a major opportunity to address both mitigation and adaptation objectives of countries around the world. But what we needed were blended finance is important going forward, and we'll hear financial perspectives today, a food system perspective, better policy alignment, but most critically for us, indicators, monitoring, reporting, and validation systems, global standards, and localization processes. So when I put that together, the Stripe review plus yesterday, I get the main natural resource management challenge facing us being producing international public goods to address localized solutions to global problems. So that's the challenge, and it sometimes seems extremely difficult to achieve all of that at once, but I think that we're on the right track, and we'll hear about that today. So what we need are new field techniques, new experimental designs, new data analytics, and new ways of working with farmers. And I'm so impressed at what I'm seeing that coming together in projects like the LASER project I read yesterday as well, combining the protocols on soil reflectance with protocols from the World Bank on living standards. And so actually coming up with that localization, a global public good approach to localize a global problem. So I'll just end there and hope we all enjoy the session today. Back to you, Marcella.
Thank you, Brent. And I mean, it's great also to know how soils are being like a main aspect that is now going to be discussed also at the COP26. And as you said, I mean, I will not say it's a challenge. Actually, it's something very neat of working on soils, and is that you work on soils locally, but the impact can be global. So actually, that's why it is also very important to keep healthy soils in the different contexts where we grow, where we work. Thank you, Brent. And now I want to introduce Dr. Job Kihara. Dr. Job Kihara is agronomist at the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT, and also has been working with the WLE for all the past 10 years. Dr. Job Kihara, he is the global leader for soils and water management at the Alliance, and has been working on soils from an agronomic perspective, but always cognizant of the multiple benefits that soils provide to the society. So, Job Kihara, welcome to this, and now we are eager to hear your Ignite presentation. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Marcela. I will share my screen. I hope we can all see my screen now.
Yes.
My name is Job Kihara, and I want to talk about agronomic advances that are helping us to understand soil health and the contribution it makes to various ecosystem services, and especially with respect to productivity. I'm just showing it as a full screen. Yeah, thank you. I wanted to just start by the context in which we are operating, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. This is a context of smallholder farms that are operating in very heterogeneous environment through different landscapes, fields in landscape positions, but also that have had different historical management practices. And over these kind of landscapes, there are various restorative practices that are implemented by some farmers, some are not implementing. So understanding this has brought in, for example, the need for multilocational trials as one of the approaches to help understand the soil conditions and the effect on productivity. Through multilocational trials, for example, we have been able to understand the responses of different soils based on the fertilization that has been applied. And for that, we can see non-responsive soils and soils that are very highly responsive, but also those are not very highly responsive. And through such trials located in different geographies and different environments, but managed similarly, we are able to identify some of the soil influencing factors like the cations, for example, calcium and magnesium ratios, but also a variety of micronutrients such as zinc, boron, and others. Also, long-term trials help us to understand the long-term perspectives. Sometimes looking at treatment effects helps us to see that one treatment or one restorative practice is better than another. But when we look at this from a temporal perspective, we also gain very interesting insights. For example, the carbon trends that we see when we compare long-term trials in Western Africa and also in Western Africa. Another very important approach that I wanted to bring to us is the use of meta-analysis and agronomic surveys. With the meta-analysis, this is involving bringing together studies conducted under different objectives by different scientists across different geographies, but using a metric that helps us to compare all of them together. And in this case, where, for example, we have looked at the application of nutrients beyond the normal N, P, and K, we do see that applying some of those micronutrients and local adaptation practices is helping us to increase productivity by up to 25%. So, of course, this is variable by the different geographies and conditions and soil types, and this is helpful in trying to manage those soils better for the resulting ecosystem services. On the other hand, I am showing agronomic surveys. Agronomic surveys basically involves working within a landscape like the one I showed at the start, and randomly sampling from hundreds of farmers, doing yield cuts, but also obtaining history of management as implemented by those farmers. And from those, we can apply leading analytics like has already been mentioned, and in this case, using regression trees, for example. And we do see very clearly that except for planting densities and varieties that are influencing this productivity, there are other factors that are proxies of soil carbon, for example. And those proxies are the position of the field on the slope. They are the distance of a field from the farmer homestead, which has implications on the ability to transfer organic resources, and also the frequency with which a farmer is applying organic resources, in this case, manure. So these two approaches are also very helpful in helping us to understand that. The third aspect that I wanted to mention as I close is the moving beyond the quantity of produce. What a lot of the work that has been done on soil health has been focusing on the quantity of produce in terms of the productivity. But now the new research is taking this beyond that into the quality of the produce, so that the food that is on the plate is actually food of higher quality. So these are important dimensions in understanding soil health and its contribution to various ecosystem services, and especially the productivity and the quality. In terms of the reflections, just to emphasize that multi-location and the long-term trials do provide complementary perspectives to understanding of soil health and the ecosystem services. And then agronomic surveys is an approach of understanding the landscape level crop productivity that helps us to couple the management and the biophysical attribute. And contributions of the soil management to produce quality is a relatively new area of study that is helping us to further the understanding of soil-based ecosystem services. And I wanted to leave us with this work that is a synthesis that we have done of soil health and ecosystem services, pulling together lessons from sub-Saharan Africa. And I think it's a nice read covering all the different ecosystem services that soil health can provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Job, and thank you also for actually using less of the time that you have had for this presentation. Please, for the participants, use the question and answer section that you have here in Zoom to write your questions, because we'll be reading those questions and we'll at the end of the panel. And Job, thank you also for this. I think you have highlighted something very important where WLE has been investing, and is in these long-term trials. I mean, how many research programs we have where we had the opportunity to have long-term trials to assess the performance of different management practices and how that affects soil health. So this has been actually one side of what we have been doing in understanding soil health and the relationship with different soil management practices. But the other side of the coin is actually very related with one of the questions that I can see right now in the chat, that is how we can then develop monitoring frameworks that are reliable, but at the same time affordable, and then ready to be used to design solutions for improving soil health. And this is actually what is the topic of our next presentation. So I'm happy now to introduce Dr. Lee Winowicki. She is the Global Research Team Leader for Soil, Land, and Land Health at ICRAF and CIFOR. And Lee, I mean, the floor is over to you, and we are eager to hear about the advancements on soil health monitoring. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Marcella. Yes, I'm Lee Winowicki, and I'm super excited to talk with you about innovations in soil health monitoring, combining systematic field assessments with spectroscopy and Earth observation. So let's just get started. In order to understand the multiple dimensions, as clearly highlighted by Job, of soil health for ecosystem restoration, climate change, food and nutrition security, we really need assessments that incorporate multiple indicators. So at C4ECRAF, we've developed the Land Degradation Surveillance Framework, and this framework has multiple indicators, as we highlight on the right, of vegetation cover, degradation, soil hydrology, soil health variables, and of course, stewardship of the land. The 3 points I want to make today is that by applying a systematic sampling framework, combined with innovative methods for soil analysis, and then allows us to couple that with statistical analysis to generate highly accurate predictive maps for decision-making. At ICRAF, we use the Land Degradation Surveillance Framework, and this is a data-driven network that is applied across projects, donors, initiatives, and as you can see, it is applied across the global tropics with an emphasis on Africa. Each one of these green dots here is a 100 square kilometer sampling site with 160 plots. That's the dots here. This is a hierarchical sampling design. But what really makes this possible, to be able to analyze soil samples from 160 plots at 2 different sampling depths, is soil spectroscopy. Otherwise, this is about shining a light on soil. It is accurate. As you can see on the right, the graphs of the prediction accuracy for a number of soil properties. It's low cost, and it gives us an assessment of multiple soil properties simultaneously, because as Job said, we're really depending on soil for many, many different ecosystem services. While eCraft is leading in this, it's because we've invested over 20 years to build a consistent global spectral library. And that also means that soil scientists need to have new skills of data analytics and handling spectra. Now we have this massive data set, and this allows us to build models to produce spatial maps of high quality. I'm just giving an example here from Impala Research Station in Laikipia, Kenya, where we've combined soil organic carbon maps. You can see brown is high carbon, with soil erosion prevalence maps, bright yellow is hot spots, into a restoration priority area based on biophysical variables, where efforts of restoration could have the best benefits biophysically. So this can be used at the project level, but also at the global level. This has really been missing robust and accurate maps, for example, of land degradation. This is very important for understanding the vulnerability to climate change, as well as crop models, as Joe highlighted. But let's not forget, it's all about working with the farmers. So having this massive data set also allows us to conduct farm level assessments. And this is something that we've been working on in WLE, where over 2,500 households in Eastern Kenya are implementing restoration activities on the farm. And we have been looking at how these activities are actually changing soil organic carbon at the household and farm level. The red dots indicate households, and this is David Kavete in Eastern Kenya, showing his productivity. So with that, I just want to leave us with a few key messages. I hope that we bust the myth about whether or not we can monitor soil health. We can. We have the tools and the methods to measure and track changes in soil health at scales for multiple stakeholders, global to farm. And that monitoring frameworks must capture the complex processes of degradation and restoration. And they must be able to track the performance of options over time to be able to be used for decision making. I'm very happy that the UN Food Systems Summit has launched the Coalition of Action for Soil Health, bringing together multiple stakeholders to scale soil health globally. And as part of this, it's about investing and capacity to not only conduct these assessments, but to interpret and interrogate the results. And really, I want to leave us with, we really need this investment in long-term and consistent monitoring in order to build the evidence base. So with that, please join us to talk about soil at the COP in the Blue Zone on November 3rd. And with that, thank you, Marcela.
Thank you, Lee. So we don't have excuses for not monitoring soil health, right? We have the methods. We actually already have a lot of information that has been collected in WLE across different contexts, with different treatment, with different management practices and so on. So I think right now the question is, what should come next in the soil health research agenda? So for that, I would like now to hear insights from our distinguished panelists who are going to provide their opinions based on the presentation they have heard, just heard, but also based on their own experience. So today we are actually very fortunate to have a panelist that is very diverse in the sense that are people that have been working on soil health from the practice perspective, from the implementation perspective of restoration projects, but also, for example, working at the policy interface for land restoration, that has been working also on research with other organizations, and that are working on certification processes where the monitoring of soil health is key. And lastly, also, we will have a panelist who will be working more from the social perspective of soil health. So with this, let me introduce our distinguished panelists. So we have, if please, you can turn on your cameras. So we have Paul Liu from the Fort Per 1000 initiative. Paul is the executive secretary of this initiative. And I know most of you know this initiative, but just to remind you that this initiative is working to demonstrate that agriculture, and in particular agricultural soils, can play a crucial role where food security and climate change are concerned. So thank you, Paul, for being here. Our second panelist is Dr. Ermias Betemerian. He is a land health scientist at CIFOR and ICRAF. He works on forest ecology to land degradation dynamics, but when working on this, he has been also incorporating soil health aspects. Very importantly, Ermias, my colleague who have been working with me also in WLE, has been a member of the UNCCD Science Policy Interface. Welcome, Ermias. Very nice to see you here. Third, I want to introduce Dr. Wei Sun. Wei, you can turn on your camera. Wei is a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI. And very interestingly, Wei, together with other colleagues of the CIR, has been working on investigating what are the gender dynamics in restoring soil health. This is actually a dimension that sometimes we neglect when we work on soils. So we are also having the pleasure to have you here, Wei. Then our next panelist is Dr. Viridiana Alcantara. Viridiana is a senior program officer at BERRA. As you know, BERRA works on certification and verification of carbon sequestration projects. She holds a PhD in soil science and has worked previously at FAO and also has been supporting Paul in the Fort Per 100 initiative. And last but very, very important is that we have today the great honor to have Dr. Ratan Lal, the 2020 World Food Prize laureate in this panel. As you all know, I don't have to introduce him a lot, but he has really left a legacy on soils research, and he has been fundamental to demonstrate how soils is really the foundation of our food systems and of our natural systems. So Dr. Ratan Lal, is really an honor to have you here in this panel. So let's start right now with this conversation with our panelists. And as I said, it's very diverse, and we wanted to have this opportunity to ask different questions for each of you. Paul, when we were thinking in this panel, we were wondering that we really would like to hear from you on how you see the need for integrated soil health monitoring in initiatives like the initiative that you are right now coordinating. And even more, I mean, what do you think are the limitations for including soil health indicators in policy and in restoration initiatives, if you see any limitation? So now we have heard from Lee that we have the methods to do it, but what do you think are those limitations that remain?
Thank you very much, Marcela, and thank you for inviting me. I'm impressed by the quality of the panel, and I hope I will not be the limitation person. Okay, so thank you for your question. I was very interested by the presentation, and I pick up some very key messages that I've noticed through the three presentation. One of them is that we need really new method of working with farmers, new approach, and I think it's key because the farmers were a little bit abandoned by science for a while. there is also some very important key message that soil health is providing ecosystem services. It's a reality. We all know that around this table, if I may say that, but too many people ignore that again in the world. And finally, that it was not really my impression, but I share the optimistic of Lian about the fact that we have tools and we need to scale them and use them to develop the approach concerning soil health. In answer to your question, I will start by telling that one of the limitations I found out is that most of the people, and mainly the policymaker, are still ignoring what is the soil health and what could be the quality and the result, the services that soil health can provide. And I wanted to, one of the proof is that, well, the definition of soil health is not so old, and there is a contribution like ITPS recently to that definition. And also people start having more and more heard about soil health in the global concept of One Health. And I like to say to the people that our health is starting also by the soil health, and it's very important to keep that in mind. So the first limitation would be integration of soil health in the policies, because most of the policymakers ignore simply that concept. But this is changing, and due to the action of Professor Lal, for instance, and soil health is also associated to carbon sequestration, considering soil as a living organism, and that we need to integrate that in our whole concept of what is health and what is the importance for our future. I would like to stress the fact that the Scientific and Technical Committee of the 4% initiative produced a document on the set of indicator and criteria in order to assess project in line with the initiative, but you will find a lot of common point with the indicator that Lian just evoked in her presentation. We should say also that improving and maintaining soil health is directly linked to the management of the land, as it was said, and this is due to the farmers' work. We need to consider, and this is also one of the results of the UNFCCC, is the fact that we have a coalition also on agroecology as a whole concept, and also the fact that agroecology constitute a group of different kinds of agriculture: conservation, organic, regenerative agriculture, agroforestry, and so on. And this is a pathway that we need to go along, and that we propose in the 4%. So I would say, coming back on the subject also on the future, most of the people fear the non-permanence of carbon sequestration in the soil, and while they are considering that storing carbon in the forest is more permanent, I would say you need to crash the matches and you will see that it's not really permanent. And it's exactly the same thing for soil. You can make bad practices and you can release part of your carbon you have stored before. So we need to change our view, because it's always easy to see tree growings, but it's difficult to see carbon sequestration in soil and soil gaining carbon content. So we need new methodology. Lian just provided some very interesting information, and we need to go further in the MRV method to associate remote sensing, sensor in the field, database on soil analysis, and machine learning to have a very complex system that would be really able to follow in real time what's going on in our soil. We are not far from that, and I think we need to increase the research on that and increase the research like some of them were already presented to us. Thank you very much. I was a little bit too long. Sorry for that.
No, that was perfect. That was just right on time. Thank you, Paul. And I think you have some very interesting things, like health starts also in the soils, right? And that's super important. And the other thing is that you have acknowledged that some improvement have been done at the policy level, but still there is some work to be done. So with that, I would like now to ask Ermias, because Ermias, as I said at the beginning, has been member of the UNCCD Science Policy Interface. And he has been co-producing guidelines to monitor soils, and especially to see, to help monitor the progress towards the targets. So Ermias, from your perspective, I mean, yes, how much policy has advanced there, but also what is needed? What is needed? I mean, remember that we are also reflecting right now for the future and for our future research agenda.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcela. And then it's a great honor and pleasure to join this panel and then share my thoughts. And then I think the two presentations were so fantastic. And then I really, I like the way, Marcela, you started what soils mean for our lives and for our planet. It is really very important. So I think job, the case of taking food, because food production and agriculture is so key, both for environment, for soils, and then also for us. So I think that was really nice. And then Lee, I think it was really nice that he took us through standardization of methods and then the use of data, and then and then also making a lot of effort in terms of innovations so that we reduce cost of monitoring soil health, and then that could really give a bit of support in terms of development as well. So I think both presentations are so good, and then I think that is really, I would like to admire both presenters. So when I come to the question you asked, Marcela, I think I would like to also support Paul that soils play a real pivotal role in all the 17 SDGs, I would say. But if you look at all those values that they give, and then the recognition and the level of investment that goes to this sector is not really as good as it is supposed to be. That's my take. Yeah, and then through my engagement with the science policy interface with the UNCCD, in terms of land degradation monitoring, we have like three basic biophysical based indicators. One is trends in soil organic carbon. Second one is trends in land productivity, and the trends in land cover change. And then it's often been criticized by many that it lacks also a socioeconomic indicator like gender or any socioeconomic indicators. However, all these three indicators have also implications for livelihoods. So what are the key advances in terms of land degradation monitoring? And then this is not exactly my point, but I also raised it among the UNCCD family, particularly with the global mechanism by which they are working towards realizing the ambitions of the convention. So there are really advances in Earth observation data that is at a global scale. So I think measuring land productivity and then land cover change reasonably is good now. Of course, it's when I say good, it is a relative term. So, but that is a global advancement, I would say. The second one, when it comes to soil organic carbon, is really, I do agree what Lee mentioned, and then I really acknowledge what WLE is putting investment, at least for the last 10 years, on soil spectroscopy. I think now we have something which is affordable and a robust method of monitoring soil organic carbon. Interestingly, soil spectroscopy is extremely good and a good predictor of soil organic carbon. And then soil organic carbon, of course, also plays a very key role in terms of soil health. And then also, of course, biodiversity and climate change, also other conventions could also benefit from. So this is really a tool which is really fit into soil organic carbon business. So that is what we need to promote as much as possible. So, and then also colleagues from the global mechanism, they told me that, we are trying to advance in terms of planning and then, countries, helping countries to set their land degradation targets. However, there are really lack of capacity at the national level. They go to the convention, they like it, they would like to do it. There is a goodwill, a political will, and then there is a lot of capacity gaps in terms of technical capacities, particularly at national level. So most countries, particularly from the developing world, they really rely too much on global databases. So they rarely use their data, and then sometimes they are not so organized to use, to know what data exists, what capacity exists even within the country. Because sometimes in the universities, you can find, or in the research centers, even the CGIAR exists in these different countries. But the way they are really not well connected is also, that is an opportunity that we need to explore, I would say. So the second one is also financial capacity, because the global mechanism and the secretariat would like to really add the capacity of governments, and then to take it even land degradation neutrality target at a regional, at a local level, because it is a little bit hanging at the national and global level. And then there is a little bit of gap between what is at the ground, a landscape, and then at what is at the regional level, and then at the national level also varies. So I think going a little bit deeper, supporting countries to go to a sub-regional level planning in terms of land gradation neutrality, it's required, but that still requires some financial and technical capacity. And then, of course, lack of local data at a national level, that's also mentioned by many, a couple of countries which I asked. So that is, sometimes it exists, sometimes also there is a lack at a national scale. So that's important. So when I come to in terms of a policy side of the story, I think, I also question how much is policy consuming global knowledge available. Is it really our knowledge influencing policy? Is it policy also benefiting from the global knowledge? I think there is a lot that could be tapped, and then I think we know a lot. And then I would say most of the things we are lacking behind, I would say, is in terms of implementation gap. So that's what I would see, because what we have done with what we know land degradation, we know climate change, we know biodiversity crisis, food crisis. But if you look at the action, I think I would say there is huge gap in terms of action. So how do we influence policy? I think one thing is, directly involving with policy makers. Instead of writing policy brief, try to really get engaged with policymakers. So my role with, representing WLE in science policy interface helped me to inject whatever, knowledge and product coming out from the program into the UNCCD system. So that is very important. When it is not possible, at least it is important to invite them to participate in scientific fora like this one. And then I think they will also know. So there is a direct and indirect way of benefiting. So, lack of synergies is also something really very important. That's my last point. And then if I also followed yesterday's FOPEMIR and then, CICAF seminar, and then I have seen that only 22 countries included soil organic carbon in their mitigation measures in NDCs. But we say that soil organic carbon plays a pivotal role in climate, but only 22 countries. This is a revised NDCs. Then that is not really a good record, I would say. And then there are 10 countries which have the highest, potential to sequester carbon and then increase, mitigate climate change. Only 5 of them included even those 10 globally, which has the highest potential. Like, for instance, China, India, Russia, Kazakhstan, South Africa. They have huge potential, but they never included soil organic carbon in their NDC. So it is revised. It's a very current thing.
Ermias, thank you so much. We're over time now, Ermias. Thank you.
Yeah, so I will stop there, and then thank you very much.
Thank you, Ermias. Ermias, you have said something super important, and it's about the social indicators. And this actually lead me now to Wei. I mean, as I say, Wei has been working on these connections between soil health and gender. So Wei, from your perspective, what should be part of the next research agenda on soil and gender?
Thank you, Marcella. I'll just highlight a few recommendations for setting priorities for gender responsive soil health research. First, long-term gender disaggregated data and in-depth contextually rooted gender analysis are needed to understand how different groups of women and men respond to different soil health interventions and incentives, what enabling conditions and programmatic strategies can create gender equitable outcomes related to soil health, how gender-specific costs and benefits revolve over time and across different stages of adoption. Second, a more integrated approach that breaks silos of discipline and bridge different lines of work to address both on and off-farm elements of soil health with a gender perspective is very much needed. And this requires interdisciplinary teams bringing soil health research, practitioner experience, and social scientists together in gender and socioeconomic analysis. And third, from a gender perspective, it's evident that supporting women's access to a soil management innovation without also addressing the formal and informal structures that hinder their application of this practice will not yield fruit. These structural conditions include insecure tenure, access to and control over land, time poverty, inadequate access to productive resources and information, and unequal decision-making power within their households and community. So we really need a multi-pronged approach that seeks to lift the multiple constraints that hinder women's adoption of soil enhancing practices and facilitate their capacity, as well as that of men's, to innovate in soil management. And fourth, managing healthy soil can contribute positively to several SDGs, including gender equality, rather than compromising them. If soil management interventions are carefully tailored, they can significantly improve women's crop productivity and generate income and well-being benefits, including health and food security benefits for women and their households. And lastly, it's about delivering research outputs the last mile. More than ever, decision makers and researchers need to work together to help untangle and interpret multiple strands of fragmented evidence through system approaches. This requires researchers and decision makers to work together to co-create knowledge, facilitated by individuals who can act as knowledge brokers and help policymakers access knowledge. This last mile of research programs merits more attention and investment. And over to you, Marcella.
Thank you, Wei. And I think this, as I said, this dimension of gender somehow, I think, incipient in the soil sciences. So thank you for your insights, Wei. And now I want to go to another area that is not necessarily research, but important now for finding the viability of soil enhancement practices. So with that, I want to ask Viridiana, from your experience in Berra, where you guys are working on verification, certification of carbon sequestration projects and so on, how do you see what are the current opportunities in the voluntary climate action space for soil?
Yes, thank you, Marcella, and also thank you for the invitation to this panel today. I'm very happy to share my views while I just recently joined actually this field of carbon markets and voluntary climate action. So to help me a little bit, I prepared a slide to share what I want to show with you. And Alex, could you show it to the audience now? Thank you. That's great. Perfect. Well, it's just one slide. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. Great, thank you. So as mentioned, I work for Verra, which is an NGO that develops standards for the voluntary carbon market and also increasingly for compliance markets. So that is government regulated. Our flagship program is the Verified Carbon Standard, or VCS. And this program provides a framework for projects in different sectors to issue carbon credits through emission reductions and removals. For the AFULU sector, which includes agriculture, as you know, the relevant GHGs, we ask projects to monitor our carbon dioxide. That includes also soil carbon, methane, and nitrous oxide. And these GHGs are monitored through different approaches. For soil carbon, for example, we give options to combine direct measurements with models, or alternatively measure and remeasure after a certain number of years. For other GHG fluxes, such as CO2 from, for example, in-farm fossil fuel emissions, or methane and N2O from biomass burning, the use of default factors from IPCC is also allowed. Currently, the only element of soil health we request for projects to monitor is soil carbon, but the practices implemented by these projects, for example, improved water management or no-till, rotational grazing, agroforestry, the list is quite long. They have, of course, other benefits for soil health. The VCS program focuses on these GHG emissions, but has also vast safeguards in place concerning socioeconomic impacts and impacts to communities. And projects are always requested to perform a local stakeholder consultation to ensure and demonstrate that no net harm will result from any project activity. In addition to this VCS credit, carbon credit, for those who are not so familiar with this space, there are other programs at Vera, the biggest one being the Climate Community and Biodiversity Standard. And that can become like a label to a carbon credit when a project can demonstrate that it creates other net positive benefits in these fields, for example, through generation of jobs. These credits have usually higher prices than the regular just carbon credits. And another program we have at Vera is called SD Vista that focuses on how projects contribute to achieving SDGs with specific methodologies for each one. For example, if a project was willing to contribute to SDG 15, Life on Land, and could demonstrate how it would achieve that and monitor it, it could follow this methodology and demonstrate its positive impact on soil health and eventually have a revenue through that. Currently, we are experiencing a huge interest in demand for projects issuing carbon credits from soil carbon increases in agriculture. We really get thousands of requests, and it's difficult to keep up. But we think a more holistic view of soils would be beneficial. That's why I'm also very happy to be able to discuss this with you today. And we intend to scope the development of a soil health label, which could represent also, similar to these other CCB standard or SD Vista, like an additional revenue source for projects through a higher price label. And we're interested in learning more about tools like what Lee presented and frameworks, and we're aware there are many options out there, which doesn't make our job more easy, but it helps, of course, to bring things together and to find out which things are robust enough to be able to be allowed in a standard. So to finalize a brief outlook, we are beginning to focus also on supply chain interventions, and kind of on the long term, this could be like a transition for carbon credit projects. That means over time, instead of providing options for the private sector to offset their emission through their purchase of carbon credits, we aim to provide a framework to support them reducing and removing the emissions within their own supply chain. So this could be a huge benefit to soil health in the agri-food sector. Thank you, Marcela.
Thank you, Viridiana. I think it's good news that, I mean, you guys are thinking in a soil health label. That could be challenging, but at the same time, I think it's a super good news that this is actually a sign now of recognition of the importance of soil health. But now we have listened that we have monitoring frameworks available, that these standards are now being on the thinking of Vera, for example. We have the initiative like the 4per1000 initiative that are really connecting on the ground. We have advances also in the post interface, but I want to close this webinar with the wise words of Dr. Ratanlal. Dr. Ratanlal, you have been now many years up to the research on soil health, and I'm sure you have heard about all these that we have been talking about today. If you want to give us an advice on where we should work on research and innovation in soil health to really build soil health and then provide all the ecosystem services that are associated to that, what would be your advice? We would like to listen to you because you have the last words in this webinar. And as I said, we are reflecting on where we need to focus on research and innovation. So I feel very honored to have you directly here and to ask you an advice.
Marcela, thank you so much. I want to thank Leanne and others for inviting me. It's really a great pleasure. I want to make 5 points very quickly. First, to give you some history of movement on soil health. FAO started a program in the 60s called World Soil Protection Policy. In the 70s, Paolo may remember, French government started a program called IBSAM, International Board for Soil Research and Management. His colleague from Montpellier, Mark Latham, was the Director General for many years. Then in 2012, a German government started a program called Global Soil Week. Their last meeting was held in Nairobi 2 or 3 years ago. A Global Soil Partnership was started by FAO same time. And all member countries are part of it. And now something that emerged from UN Food System Summit, CASH, which has been enthusiastically supported by many countries. And I hope it is going to be implemented. The question is why these things did not really impact, did not attract the attention of donors and others from the historical perspective. So I think the soil health indicator that Leanne presented and other, and I fully support them. Yes, we can measure soil health, but I'd like to give you my thinking of what a soil health indicator should look like. Number one, it must be the one that scientists can quantify, but farmers and policymakers can understand and relate to. That's very important. If the farmers don't understand and relate to, we are lost. Secondly, the indicator that policymakers can comprehend and translate into action through a farm bill or through promoting some activity. And number three, which financiers can understand and are encouraged to invest in. We are lacking investment. So financial, and which private sector can adopt to promote translating scientific knowledge into on-the-ground action. It must meet those criteria. Unless it does, we cannot succeed. The device, the procedure must be cost effective and something that farmers can do it by themselves. For example, a Wi-Fi based system to monitor soil organic matter content, soil health at a very low cost. And we do have those devices coming up. So economic and cost effectiveness that farmers can themselves, like a temperature of the body, you got a thermometer, stick it in your mouth and you get it. Similarly, something like that. I would like to mention cooperation with private sectors. There is a growing recognition, and Leanne and others know it from the CASH, of the importance of cooperation between the private sector, farmers, managers, development organization, academician, with the policymakers, with the goal to translate science into action by developing a pro-farmer and nature positive agricultural innovation. We must have private sector involved in this game. It's very important. So therefore, moving forward in terms of what private sector and others can do with these indicators, I would like to suggest the following. Number one, grow healthy food on healthy soil with a negative emission farming. I hear quite a lot about zero net emission. Zero net emission in agriculture means nothing. It has to be negative emission farming. Identify and implement policies to support healthy food systems. Eventually, it's the food system which we are concerned with, along with the soil. Then we must have some kind of sustainability issue involved and tax something which is not sustainable. Adopting policies of soil management which are not sustainable. Somebody should be responsible and accountable for it. We must inform, produce food labeling. Food label, what is their carbon footprint? What was involved in producing it? What is their content, nutrition value, nutrient value, micronutrient especially. And we must have a fortification and biofortification of food, develop climate resilient food system, and of course we must pay farmers for ecosystem services. And I think with that, I would like to make my last comment that somewhere we have to let policymakers, general public know the concept of stewardship of soil health, because soil stewardship and care must be embedded in every fruit and vegetable eaten. That's what I was talking about, food labeling. In each grain ground into the bread consumed, in every cup of water used, in every breath of air inhaled, in every scenic landscape cherished. This message should be in the primary school walls of the kindergarten everywhere, so that these children know healthy food comes from a healthy soil. And this should be followed by the other message that healthy soil equal to healthy diet, equal to healthy people, equal to healthy ecosystem, equal to healthy planetary processes. So while the scientific jargon, equations, mathematics, tables, graph, flow charts are excellent, unless general public understand them and policymakers can translate them and farmers can relate to, it does not amount to very much. So we have a job cut out for us. We really have, and we can do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ratanlal, for this very, insightful advice. I want to, before I give the floor to my colleague Lee, to close what you said. Healthy food requires healthy soils. And this is also the point that was made initially by Job, but we need to get closer to the action, and it means also changing the way we are communicating the evidence and so on. I think we can continue on and on this conversation. Before I give the floor also to Lee Berra, there are many people that are looking for the soil health label development. So please keep us posted on that. And if you think you need a session to get insights from us, probably we can organize a more detailed session to give you feedback and also to hear what you guys are thinking. I think that could be a next step after this webinar. So with this,
I'll come back to that.
Yeah, that will be great. Let's take the opportunity that Lee has convened us today to think forward now. And now we have to close. The time is always very short in these webinars. This is what I don't like of webinars anymore. But Lee, the floor is now open to you. Please give us some closing remarks, and also use now the hat you have on the Food System Summit. I know you have been working there on bringing soils there to the conversation on nature positive agriculture and so on. So give us some closing remarks, and especially thinking on the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Marcela. And I see we're over time. So really, I just want to thank everyone. And I hope that all the participants are as motivated as I am to, as Dr. Lal says, take on the important role we have for soil stewardship, and to make that connection between healthy soil, healthy people, and healthy planets. And I just think that we all have a big responsibility to take care of our soil, to take care of each other, to take care of the planet. And I invite everyone to, get active in improving your own soil, get active if you can influence policy, join the Coalition of Action for Soil Health that has grown out of the UN Food System Summit, attend the 4 per mil day during the COP, a full day. Join all the sessions, and let's make sure soil health is highlighted in the next COP, and because this is really an important calling. So with that, I thank everyone for taking the time to join this webinar to share our passion about advancing and scaling soil health globally. And I'd like to close the webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.